I should probably mention that I will be discussing spoilers in this video. However, I'm assuming that everybody who wanted to watch it has watched it by now, so the class can just have an open discussion at this point, right? Saltburn. I can't stop thinking about it. I'm hoping if I put something out there into the universe and I talk about it, I will be able to do something else with my life. So here goes. I know that a lot of people came into this with a Jacob Elordi obsession. I didn't know who this guy was until watching this film. We all know a girl can't resist a 6'5" guy in a dead wife montage, so he was always going to be a popular one. I personally was here for Barry Keoghan. I was delighted when I saw a interview with the director Emerald Fennell, and she said she had seen The Killing of a Sacred Deer and recognised Barry's weird sexiness. And I also saw that film when I was younger, and I've never stopped thinking about it, so I was excited for what Barry was going to bring to this film, especially because the trailer was so mysterious. Barry was, of course, brilliant. The one thing I will say did not work in his favour was the accent. Even though the character explicitly said that he was from Prescott, it took me until halfway through my second viewing to realise that he was trying to be Scouse. When we first get into the plot and we're at Oxford, I really thought this was going to be like the film Kill Your Darlings, and if you haven't seen that, it's basically about Daniel Radcliffe starting at college and getting involved with this troubled older boy called Lucian. Lucian's kind of a dick, and I kind of thought that Felix was going to turn out to be the bad guy in this situation. It did not go that way, and I loved the way that Fennell clearly used the tropes that we're used to seeing at the beginning of these types of romance films to subvert our expectations. And it turned out that Kill Your Darlings was way more literal than I could have ever thought, but we will get there. There were early hints, of course, that something was not right with Oliver, okay? He was not the guy that he was presenting himself as necessarily. Like, in order to get in with Felix, he takes up smoking, he stops wearing his glasses, he starts wearing more casual clothes, you know, in order to fit Felix's aesthetic more, to appeal to Felix more. And, you know, anybody would do this. It's a trope at the beginning of a romance film, right? And so we don't necessarily immediately see this as a red flag in the way that we normally would. I think the biggest red flag is that he ditches his only friend at college with no kind of ceremony whatsoever for Felix at the pub. But his friend was a fucking weirdo anyway, and of course, Oliver is doing this for love, so we all forgive him for that. There's quickly trouble in paradise when Oliver tries to clean up after Felix, and Felix gets offended by it and ditches him and doesn't call him to go to the pub later. I think the reason that Felix gets so annoyed is because he likes to pretend that he's not like his family, right? He wants to pretend that he's down with the kids at his college and doesn't act like this rich, entitled boy, but he is in fact this rich, entitled boy, and he is used to his house like staff looking after him, and so to have this pointed out to him so blatantly by Oliver, I feel like he became uncomfortable and incensed by that, bro, and that's why he kind of distanced himself from Oliver. And I don't know if that was just him having a tiff for that night or if this was something that was going to permanently continue, and we will never know because of what Oliver decides to do next. Oliver turns up at Felix's room and reveals that he's had a call that his dad has passed away. And obviously Felix is really sympathetic, and he says, dude, like, you can take some time off school. But Oliver says, Felix, it's not like that, you know, this is all I have. And although of course he is talking there about the class divide between him and Felix, and the fact that, yeah, Felix could not go to school and it wouldn't matter for his future, but Oliver needs to try hard in order to get somewhere in his life. Also, I think in retrospect, looking back at the film, knowing what we do about this scene, Oliver maybe wasn't just talking about school. He may have been talking about his relationship with Felix, okay? And that being all he had, that being his only goal in life, that was why he was willing to stoop to this point. That's why this scene is happening right now. Maybe I'm reading too deep into that. It is entirely possible, but something I love to do. As a result of Oliver apparently having this terrible home life and Felix feeling sorry for him, and especially after the death of his father, Felix invites Oliver back to his home, Saltburn. Of course, I love how the house tour is entirely focused on Felix. It really shows us where Oliver's head is at in this part of the film. He loves Felix. He's obsessed with Felix. He's not interested in all of this random trivia that Felix is giving about the house, because Felix is looking really good right now in his early 2000s finest. We're introduced to Felix's family, one of which is Venetia, who is clearly a very troubled child. And Oliver sees Venetia on the grounds later that night, and he goes out to meet her. And what Oliver does in this scene is very manipulative, okay, right? Because Venetia's sitting out there in the cold and he gives her his blanket, and this physically weakens him, right? He's standing there in his boxers, but also he has got his incredible arms out, so it is a little bit of a manipulative and flirty tactic on Oliver's part here, and I do love that about him. Venetia mentions last year's one concerning Felix's friends, and it kind of gives us these hints. Ollie is disposable, okay? Felix gets rid of girls at school like they're nothing. And apparently he had a friend who he was so close to that he invited him for the summer last year, but now that friend is nowhere to be seen. Even Pamela, his mother's friend, who Felix seems so to take after, that friend was kicked out of the house unceremoniously in the middle of the night because she'd overstayed her welcome. And so Ollie's constantly reminded that he's replaceable, right? And he's desperate to change it. That's why I think he does some of the things he does over the course of the film. The scene with the doppelganger story is, of course, fantastic, with the doppelganger of Felix going past the window at the exact moment that the doppelganger in the story goes past the window. And this, of course, being a foreshadowing of Felix's death later on in the film. Not something I noticed the first time, but once it was pointed out to me, I was pretty obsessed with it. There are more hints. There are more hints that Oliver is a little manipulative, sneaky bastard, and not just in a flirty sense. Of course, he reads up about the plates in a book he finds about the house and uses this to ingratiate himself to the father. Of course, the only other person present in this scene is Farley, and so Oliver later uses this to engineer the framing of Farley for trying to steal said plates. If you were to remember that scene when Farley was being kicked out, then you would realise, of course, that it was a framed job. Then, of course, comes the iconic bath scene, wherein I think everybody was a bit more shocked by Barry licking the thousands and thousands of year old drain. Well, maybe not that old, but still. As opposed to, the drinking of the bathwater. I think Belle Delphine ran that one into the ground a few years back. I like the way that Emerald Fennell uses bodies in this film, for lack of a better way to put it. I think that although there is nudity in the film, it's not sexy unless it's intended to be. For example, when they're all naked in the field, that's not sexual. When Barry is dancing at the end, that's not sexual. That's like an expression of freedom. But in this scene, when it is explicitly sexual, there aren't any sexual parts of the body shown, okay? We're focusing on Felix's neck, we're focusing on his jawline. Sexiness is in the suggestion of what's happening rather than explicitly showing us what's happening, and I like that. So Ollie uses the personal information that Venetia's mother gives him in order to seduce her. He calls her a masochist, which is going to be a buzzword in her mind because that's something that her grandmother used to say to her, I believe. And obviously she's been fed this rhetoric by her mother that if she finds the right guy or girl, then maybe she'll love herself a little bit more. And so Ollie presents himself as maybe he could be that right guy or girl. I mean, he's nice enough to give her his blanket when he's not wearing anything else, right? Ollie sees this weakness in Venetia and he exploits it. And it's something he does with the mum as well later, because we see throughout the film that the mum likes to live this clueless lifestyle and doesn't like to see any of the nastiness going on around her. And so when push comes to shove and it's time to actually take a little bit of nasty action, that's where Sir James, her husband, comes in and kind of hurries things along, like kicking out Pamela. And that's why after he's gone at the end of the film, Elspeth feels like she needs someone in her life to be that buffer for her, right? And so that's how Oliver can make his way back to Saltburn. When Farley picks the karaoke song for Oliver, I think it's interesting because Oliver tries to put the slight back on Farley and says, oh, this is your song too, Farley, but Farley fully leans into it and takes on the performance. He understands that maybe this kind of is his role in a way in the family, but he doesn't let that affect him because he knows at least that he's better than Oliver, at least in his mind. Whereas Oliver is completely fucking downtrodden by the fact that Farley has done this to him. I think he breaks the mirror in the scene after this because he doesn't want to see himself the way that Farley and the rest of the family see him, as this charity case, right? He sees himself as so much more than that, and so he breaks the mirror, breaking that reflection of himself that has been put upon him by these horrible rich people. I also think that he goes to seduce Farley that night, not because he wanted to get access to his phone, although that was obviously a bonus. He could have just snuck into his room. I think that the seduction had to happen because Oliver wanted to take back some of that power and control over Farley. He wanted to feel like he had that control over Farley for that short amount of time. When I was thinking about doing a bit of a review for this film, I thought back about what my favourite scene might have been, and I thought to myself, girl, are you really going to be so cliched as to the fact that your favourite scene is the scene where he seduces Farley in the dubious consent scene? So really? But hear me out. I'm going to justify myself. I feel like it's a good representation of the whole film, right? I think that Oliver spitting into his hand at the end of the scene is really funny and gross after this peak tension and sexuality. It's ridiculousness and realism among the gothic and disturbing. And I think that that's what Emerald Fennell was going for with the entire aesthetic of this film. That's why she thought it was so important to put cigarette butts and empty cans of Diet Coke in front of ancient tapestries and amazing works of art. It's about the juxtaposition. The scene where they go back to Prescott. Oh my god, it's cringe the first time. Honestly, worst thing that anybody did throughout the course of the entire film was Felix invading all of his personal privacy, bro, and taking him back to his parents' house without telling him. It only gets worse the second time when you know for a fact that Ollie was lying about everything and that his home life was actually great and his dad isn't even dead. Horrendous. However, we do get possibly the best line of the entire film in this scene, and it's when, after all of this awkwardness and tension and just feeling absolutely awful and cringe for like a full 5 minutes, Felix just busts out his most charming smile and his most fake personality and says, "I love Spagball." After this, it's Oliver's party, and I'm just obsessed with every shot of him in the antlers, but I especially love the part where Felix and his slutty fairy friend are going into the maze in shadow, and they're obviously these sweet little silhouettes with cute little wings, right? And then here's Oliver looking all dark and mysterious with his antlers coming in behind him. I fucking absolutely love it. The shot where he enters the maze is just, I think, the most visceral part of this for me, apart from Oliver admitting that he loves Felix and Felix saying that he makes his blood run cold, is the birthday song part. Because, girl, like, everybody forgets Oliver's name in the birthday song, and it really cements the fact that the only person that Oliver cared about and the person who would have made that moment okay for him was not there for him in that moment. Like, Felix was the last thing that he had left, his only connection to the world, the thing that he'd been focusing on for so long, and now it's ruined. It's almost cry-worthy if, you feel like feeling sorry for Oliver, which I'm not saying I do. Moving quickly on to the grave scene, the infamous grave scene, the misuse, in fact, of a grave scene. A lot of people think that this scene was for shock value. I think that they think a lot of scenes in the film were for shock value, but I think that this one especially was really important for me personally because can't believe I just said that about this scene, but because not only is this obviously a scene where Oliver is feeling a lot of passion, a lot of regret, it really shows us how he felt about Felix. It's also on another level, and I think this is something that I don't see discussed a lot, and maybe some people are forgetting about, is that it's also the fucking ultimate act of disrespect and like non-consent ever. And it shows that duality of Oliver and how his wants change throughout the course of the film. Like how the story cuts off after Oliver is kicked out of Saltburn and just immediately picks up with him meeting the mum again after the dad has died. It really shows to us that nothing else matters to Oliver. Like, that's nothing that he did in the years that passed in between was important to him. Just him meeting Elspeth. And then of course he fucking murders Elspeth as well and dances around naked to murder on the dance floor, which is really weird because about a week before I watched this film, I put Murder on the Dance Floor on at a party that I was at, and I couldn't stop listening to it all that week. And then it was at the end of this film, and I was just absolutely amazed. It was like a sign from God that I absolutely should love this film, and I absolutely did. I can't believe that Barry Keoghan didn't want to dance through the house because he was absolutely so good at it, and it would just not be the same if he had like done a power walk through it or something like he wanted to do. Also, can't go past this bit without mentioning that we saw full wang, which is, visceral. What is my take on the film, and do I want to talk about it in 30 years? Personally, I think that Oliver realises early on at college that playing by the books doesn't work. He's not popular like Felix is, and Felix doesn't try at his studies. Teachers don't even like him, as we can see in the Farley interview. Farley turns up late and yet he has way more respect and stuff by the end. because he's got connections. At Saltburn, Emerald Fennell had a maze made specifically, and she wanted a really, really hard route to the middle and then an easy route that she called the cheats route. So I think that Oliver, as much as he was in love with Felix, which he was, and we will get to that, he also saw Felix as his cheat route, right? Like, he can go to college and he can get the knowledge that he needs from that, but he'll never have the connections that Felix has, and so he has to get in with Felix. I think that once he gets to Saltburn, he kind of realizes that the poor little me act won't work forever, because obviously we have Pamela, who gets kicked out in the middle of the night despite, literally being hunted down for her life, presumably. He sees the way that Farley is treated within the household also, and he sees that this isn't the way to get respect here in the way that he needs to get ahead in the world. He's desperate to prove that he's more than that as well, and I think that a lot of his attraction to Felix plays into that need to prove himself in a way. And I think that maybe these reasons combined is why he seduces Venetia, right? Because to have a romantic attachment to somebody in the house is to have a more concrete and solid root there. It's important to note that Oliver doesn't start lying with Felix. Like, this isn't just something that he started doing on the fly. It's clear that he's been lying to his parents his entire life. It's entirely possible that he lied about reading all the books on the list at the very start of the film. Some of the stuff that he says in the narration directly contrasts with what we are shown on screen, so even the stuff that he says there is not reliable. I think that he's always had the potential to be the fucking creature that he was at the end of the film, but the environment at Saltburn, being around these older people and seeing the way that they operated, gave him the skills that he needed to finally take them down in the end. He was in love with Felix though. Like, there's absolutely no denying. And I think that a lot of his focus was on trying to find a romantic connection with Felix for a lot of the film. And then obviously when he saw that that wasn't working, he moved on to Venetia. And then as his grip starts slipping and he loses Felix, that's when I think he flips and thinks, fuck it, I'm just going to go for the whole house. Sleeping with the same girl as Felix at school, drinking his bathwater, sleeping with his sister, shagging his grave, they're all ways to get close to Felix because the man is obsessed with him. This is a film for the girlies who crave, okay? The ones who want so badly, because that is what Oliver is doing, okay? He's doing these insane fucking things because he knows that he's never going to get close to Felix. IRL, bro. When he says that he hated him in the final speech to Elspeth, right? He says it again and he tries to repeat it with such gusto and he fucking stutters. He's like, I hate him. And I'm like, bitch, shut the fuck up. Oh, God. Oh, yeah, this is fantastic. Turn the layer on, dickhead. I'm going to talk about some characters before I get into my final thoughts and a big conclusion, okay? I want to talk about Oliver first, obviously. I think it's really interesting that there's this motif throughout the film that we see a lot of split reflections of him. There's one at Oxford through the window. My personal favourite one at the dinner table where he's reflected and it looks like he's got his own head on a plate. Then right after Felix finds out, there's a really good one where he's in the 3 mirrors in his bedroom. One of the reflections is in the light and the other one is completely in shadow, and it shows us these two opposing sides of Oliver. It's very, very clever. It shows that he's playing characters. There are a lot of facets to him. Felix, was he nice? I got a vibe about Felix from the beginning. It was when he was pushing Oliver to know about his upbringing, trying to kind of look for a little bit of gossip. And then once Oliver opens up about his supposedly drug dealer parents, Felix is like, oh, that must have been awful. Was it awful? Tell me about how awful it was, Oliver. He makes fun of his mum for doing exactly the same thing and pushing for information and makes out like he's so much better than all of his family when really he's just the same as them. And almost this lack of honesty from him is like worse in a way than him just being true to it. You know what I mean? Just own it, Felix. He treats people like toys. He doesn't know the name of his footman. He's kind of casually racist towards said footman. The worst thing he ever did, which is the meddling in Oliver's family life when nobody asked him to get involved. A big part of the discussion around Saltburn is, of course, did Felix love Oliver back? And I really think it is supposed to be a mystery to us, right? But I'm kind of... This is me personally, okay? And we all know that I love a fucking tragedy, so me personally, I don't think that Felix did love Oliver back. I think that there is a level to him that liked the admiration he got from Oliver and that maybe suspected that there was a little bit of, romance in the air for Oliver. And that's maybe why he left the bathroom door open that one time, but there is a scene later in the film where Oliver tries to get into the bathroom again and the door is locked. And so it's like, did Felix shut Oliver out before the relationship developed any further, because he didn't want it to go there. And it was more about this vanity, this wanting to be admired by people. And, at the time, Oliver was the only person who was around. I know that it was romantic on Oliver's side, obviously, but I hesitate to just say that every close pair of boy friends are in love, because it just adds to this stigma, right, of like boys aren't allowed to be close or they're gay. And nothing that the two of them really engage in, apart from when Oliver's confessing his love at the end. Nothing, the closeness that they have, and the kind of touchy-feely relationship that they have is nothing that I would say was particularly romantic. Maybe a little bit flirtatious, but who doesn't flirt with their friends? Bro, are you really friends with someone if you don't get accused of being gay with them every now and again? People also cite the fact that he got like jealous over Oliver sleeping with Venetia, but clearly he's had a situation like this in the past that hasn't turned out well, and so he's got like, not like trauma or whatever, but he's got like bad experiences with that, so it's not a situation that he probably wants to repeat. And in general, I would posit that, God, I need to stop saying posit. I would say, yeah, that any person would be annoyed that their friend had started sleeping with their sibling. I think any person wouldn't just immediately be okay with it. Anyway, I think there would be a lot of weird emotions there, and so that's without any confirmation either particular way. I think that we cannot say that Felix was necessarily jealous in this situation. Another notable character for me is Farley, and I did mention him in the plot somewhat, but he doesn't really get most screen time, but the stuff that he does, he's fucking fantastic in. I like that early on, I'm pretty sure it's when they're at college, he's at a party and he's wearing two party hats so they look like devil horns, because in the beginning we see Farley and we see him as this bully character, this foil to Oliver getting with Felix, right? Because we still think it's a romance film at this point. And so Farley, as the bully, has the little devil horns because that's the role that he's playing. Then by the end, we see that Oliver has taken on the horns, the actual antlers, at the Midsummer Night's Dream party, and I just like that little symbolism there, because there's a lot of comparisons to be made between Oliver and Farley, but I've not seen anybody pick up on that one yet, so I just thought I'd drop it in there. I like the fact that Farley doesn't fall for Oliver's act for even a second. Even when they're at college and he sees Oliver in the tux, he's like, "Oh, you're almost passing," and Oliver says, "Passing for what?" And he's like, "A real human boy." And he refers to Oliver as coming from a factory. He does not fall for the manipulations of Oliver because he's not as willing to accept farce and facade as the people in the higher classes in the film are. A lot of people are disappointed that Saltburn was not the class commentary that they wanted it to be, but I like the class commentary that it does make. Like I say, the Cattons never say exactly what they mean. It's all about facade first. They get rid of Pamela in the middle of the night so as not to make a fuss. Elspeth suggests they go for lunch when their son has just died, and Farley gets shouted at for expressing his stupid American feelings. People like to talk about why Farley survives, and to be honest, I don't think it was any kind of kinship from Oliver that, spurred Farley's life. I honestly just think that after Oliver's first attempt to get rid of him didn't work, Oliver knew that Farley would never let Oliver get that fucking close again. So he really just had to kind of hatch a plan to get Farley as far away from Saltburn as possible for as long as possible. Oliver obviously refers to himself as a vampire in that one scene, and the comparisons are notable. He would never be allowed into the world of Saltburn and the world of the upper class unless he was invited, which he is by Felix. He consumes bodily fluids. It's like he takes on his true form at night. That's where he does all his dirty work. He's associated with the red lighting, and he literally, at the end of the film, takes the lifeblood of the family, Felix. Venetia literally can't live without him, and the parents fall to pieces without their son to take over their legacy. However, I would like to posit that Oliver is actually a furry, which is not completely out of the realm of possibility, right? With the Midsummer Night's Dream shit. Not only is he about 5 inches tall, while everybody else in the cast is ridiculously tall, which was an intentional decision, I am convinced of it, he tricks and seduces his way to the actual king's room. By the way, I forgot to mention, Oliver is like 99% this boy is a Leo, and I think that's really appropriate because this film is his coronation, him taking the throne of Saltburn, right? I just think it's very appropriate. Emerald Fennell literally thought of everything. Back to him being a furry. He replaces Farley in the family, and then Felix after his death, like this little changeling fucking child. And then after he's fucking killed everybody and taken this throne, right? He skips naked around a fucking table. Do you need any more evidence? In conclusion, Emerald Fennell is an author, and I will hear no arguments about it. Barry Keoghan is a magician. I think the way that Emerald Fennell put it was, the closer you are, the less you know with his characters, and I love that. I love unclear and changing motivations. I think that it makes characters feel more real, just feel more alive, and I love Saltburn. I think that it is beautiful. It's like a gorgeous film, and the storyline appeals to me personally. I think that is also beautiful. It's funny, it's tragic, it's gross, and I love all of it for exactly what it is, bro. I'm not gonna cry. I've just got something in my eye, I swear.